Welcome back to the deep dive. You sent us, well, quite a fascinating stack of sources this week, profiling a really unique figure in British music. We're talking about Jay McAllister, though you probably know him as Beans on Toast.
That's right. And our mission today really is to go beyond just, a standard biography.
Exactly. We want to distill the essence of this career. It's built not really on huge chart hits or massive mainstream hype, but on something else entirely. Relentless consistency, almost unbelievable discipline, actually.
Yeah, it's a model of creative output that just, well, it flies in the face of how the modern music industry usually works.
It really does.
We're essentially looking at the power of the self-imposed deadline here. Because when we talk about Beans on Toast, you have to understand this is a musician who has released a brand new studio album every single year.
And always on the same day, right? December 1st.
Traditionally, yes.
Yeah.
December 1st, which is his birthday, and he's kept that up since 2009.
That pattern, that's what we're calling the consistent conundrum, and it's really the hook here, isn't it? We're not talking about, like, live albums or B-sides EPs every year.
No. These are full studio records, often quite thematic, reacting to the world around him. 15 of them by now. Produced on this schedule is so tight, it almost turns him into a musical journalist of his own life.
A chronicler, yeah. It's an incredible output.
It really is. And his style, well, he operates firmly within that folk tradition.
Yeah.
But the sound is broader than just that. It's complex. He draws on alternative rock, definitely some soft rock, pop rock elements in there too. But the core identity, I think, rests on two really crucial intertwined genres. Anti-folk and comedy rock.
Okay, anti-folk and comedy rock. And he's a UK songwriter originally from Braintree in Essex.
Yep, and he signed to Extra Mile Recordings. That label connection is actually pretty central to how he's managed to do all this. We'll definitely get into that.
Yeah, let's pause on that Extra Mile connection for a second.
Yeah.
Because they're known for artists who kind of thrive outside the mainstream, aren't they? Often with that punk or acoustic DIY feel. Thinking of Frank Turner, obviously, who seems quite important to this story.
Absolutely crucial. And for an artist like Beans on Toast, who demands, or rather needs the freedom, to drop an album every year on his own specific deadline, well, being with a label that actually supports that kind of creative autonomy isn't just helpful, it's non-negotiable.
Right. They have to be on board with the whole concept.
Exactly. Extra Mile doesn't just sign artists. They seem to embrace these, let's say, idiosyncratic models. They allow him to treat his career almost like an annual almanac. They prioritize getting the content out timely over the, often glacial pace of those big mainstream album cycles.
15 albums in 15 years. It really does set the stage for a remarkable deep dive. So where does this journey begin? Let's trace it back. Okay, section 1, the origin story. We're going from Essex pubs to anti-folk. The man himself, Jay McAllister. Born in Epping, December 1st, 1980.
Which explains the album release date tradition, of course.
Ah, good point. And he grew up mostly in Braintree, Essex. Sources mention he has one older brother.
Yeah, those early Essex roots are definitely part of the story. But his first sort of serious musical venture kicks off while he's still local. Back in 1996, attending Notley High School, he formed a band called Jellicoe.
Jellicoe. Okay. Did they do much?
They were pretty active, actually. They released one studio album, apparently. But like a lot of school bands, it ran its course. They split up around 2001.
And that breakup seems to be the catalyst, right? That's when he makes the move. Leaves Essex, heads for North London.
Exactly. A classic move, leaving the hometown for the cultural hub of the capital, seeking something more.
But wasn't instant transformation into Beans on Toast, was it? There's a bit of a gap, about 4 years, seems like, where Jay McAllister is just developing, maybe. Before that stage name, Beans on Toast properly surfaces in 2005.
Right. And this is where the environment becomes just fundamentally important in shaping the art, the whole persona. The sources point again and again to one specific place as his, kind of, ground zero.
Which place was that?
The Holloway Road Pub, Nambucca.
Nambucca, I've heard of it. Known for live music, right?
Very much so. And crucially, it wasn't just where he played gigs. He actually lived and worked there at the time. So he was completely immersed in that scene, that very specific, hyperlocal, grassroots music environment.
That proximity, living and working where you perform, that must have a huge impact. Your audience isn't just, anonymous faces in the dark. It's your mates, the regulars you serve drinks to, your colleagues.
Precisely. And you can almost hear it in his style, can't you?
Yeah.
That conversational, witty, very direct, often quite funny approach. It wasn't cooked up in some isolated studio somewhere.
No, it feels like it was forged right there, interacting with people, maybe trying out lines while pulling a pint.
I think that's exactly right. And it connects so directly to that anti-folk genre we mentioned earlier. Maybe we should unpack that term a little.
Yeah, good idea, because it seems central to who he is as an artist. What exactly is anti-folk?
Well, it basically started as a reaction against the sort of perceived seriousness and sometimes overly polished presentation of the traditional folk scene, particularly in the U.S., Greenwich Village originally.
Okay, so anti-seriousness.
In a way, yeah. It embraces lo-fi recording aesthetics, sometimes a bit of punk energy or attitude, definitely comedic timing. And the lyrics are often fiercely political or just very conversational, almost like diary entries.
And the performance style?
Deliberately casual. Sometimes feels a bit shambolic, maybe rough around the edges, but intentionally so. It creates this feeling of a shared secret almost between the artist and the audience. Very intimate, even when it's being loud or funny.
So Nambucca, his home base. It was the perfect petri dish for that anti-folk style then.
Absolutely perfect. He could write a song about something that happened that day or some political event and probably play it that night. Test it out immediately in front of a live, very engaged crowd.
Getting instant feedback.
Exactly. It fostered that authenticity and immediacy that would later become the hallmark of his yearly albums. The Nambucca era really cemented that the raw performance, the story being told, and that connection with the audience, that was way more important than chasing some kind of studio perfection.
And that anti-establishment vibe, coupled with the humor at the comedy rock side, means he can tackle quite heavy subjects, can't he? Politics, social issues, environmentalism.
Yeah, but without ever sounding like he's preaching from a soapbox. He delivers it with a bit of a wink, a wry observation, like a chat you'd actually have down the pub.
Which brings it full circle back to Nambucca.
That grounding was essential. It allowed him to take that very local success and start translating it into something much bigger, a national, even international presence eventually.
Right, so he's honed this unique conversational anti-folk style right there in the crucible of Nambucca. The next big question then is, how do you take that intimacy, that very specific vibe, and scale it up? How do you maintain it year-round?
Well, that's where the tradition really starts to take hold, which brings us neatly into Section 2. The tradition takes hold looking at his early collaborations and key milestones, roughly from 2007 through to 2014.
Okay. And the first big sign that this was more than just a London pub act?
I think it was his immediate embrace by the UK festival circuit. The sources make a big point of what they call the Glastonbury Guarantee.
The Glastonbury Guarantee, what's that?
Beans on Toast has played Glastonbury Festival every single year since 2007.
Every year, wow. That's incredible consistency in itself. Just getting booked that regularly for Glastonbury is huge.
It is. And think about it from a business perspective, too. For an independent artist, being a reliable, perennial Glastonbury staple gives festival bookers enormous confidence.
Yeah, they know exactly what they're getting. A solid draw, an engaging performer, someone who brings their own dedicated grassroots following.
Exactly. It becomes this powerful calling card for negotiating slots on other festival stages, maintaining that crucial visibility year after year, even without necessarily having a massive radio hit single driving it.
And did that festival presence translate into other opportunities quickly?
It seems so. The validation came pretty fast with some high-profile support slots. As early as 2008, he was supporting Kate Nash.
Oh, wow. She was huge around then. Where was that?
At the Hammersmith Apollo in London.
Hammersmith Apollo. Okay, that's a serious step up from a Holloway Road pub. That shows his appeal was already scaling rapidly.
Definitely. And all this momentum, this growing reputation, it all kind of culminates in the actual start of the big tradition, the debut album, Standing on a Chair. And it lands right on schedule, December 1st, 2009.
Standing on a chair. But here's the bit that always gets me about that debut. It wasn't just a standard album, was it?
No, it was audacious. A massive, sprawling 50-track double album.
50 tracks for a debut. That's bold.
It's incredibly bold. It wasn't a cautious first step into the recording world. It was like opening the floodgates.
What kind of message does that send, releasing 50 songs at once?
Well, two things, I reckon. First, that he just had this overwhelming backlog of material, of ideas ready to go. And second, that he was prioritizing artistic freedom, that sheer breadth of expression over any kind of conventional, tightly curated album structure.
You could argue maybe that much material risks, uneven quality.
You could, but I think the debut was designed to make a statement, to overwhelm you with personality and range. And crucially, he didn't just dump it out there himself. He got some serious names involved.
Right. The production and features were pretty high profile for a debut like that.
Very. It was produced by Ben Levitt.
From Mumford & Sons.
Of the very same. Which immediately placed him right in the middle of that huge folk revival scene that was happening then. And the album was packed with collaborators, too. Guest vocals from Frank Turner, from Amy the Great, members of the Holloways.
So he was already plugged into a really strong network.
Absolutely. That debut instantly solidified the community he was part of and would continue to rely on. And he kept the momentum going. 2010, right on time, comes the follow-up, Writing on the Wall.
Who produced that one?
He co-produced it with Ian Grimble, another respected name. And the sources stressed that this wasn't just flying under the radar anymore. Critics were taking notice. Positive reviews in places like the Sunday Times, the Mirror.
And radio play. Was he getting on air?
Yeah, significantly.
Yeah.
Getting spins on BBC Six Music, which makes sense, but also XFM, and even getting plays on the bigger BBC Radio 1 and Radio 2 networks. So the quality control was clearly there, even with that rapid annual pace.
And that momentum seemed to carry through into the live scene, too, particularly within that sort of punk folk community. He was part of the West Way Round the UK tour.
That's right. And that tour was quite notable, recognized as the first national tour made up entirely of bands associated with Strummerville.
Ah, Strummerville. That's the charity set up in memory of Joe Strummer from The Clash, isn't it?
Exactly. It supports grassroots projects, helps out musicians and artists who might not get opportunities otherwise, often those with that independent punk or folk spirit that Strummer embodied.
So being part of that Strummerville scene really cements his credentials, doesn't it? Puts him firmly in that lineage of artists operating outside the purely commercial machine, focusing on message, community.
Precisely. And speaking of community, that connection deepened hugely with one figure in particular, Frank Turner.
Yeah, you mentioned him earlier. How did that relationship develop?
Well, in 2011, Frank Turner actually took over production duties for the third album, Trying to Tell the Truth.
Okay, so they were working together directly in the studio.
And that relationship wasn't just about making records. It became a massive vehicle for scaling up Beans on Toast's audience. Exponentially, really.
How so?
The biggest breakthrough moment, arguably, came in April 2012. Beans on Toast was the support act for Frank Turner's massive, sold-out show at Wembley Arena.
Wembley Arena. Wow. Okay, that's the big leagues.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the contrast is almost funny when you think about it. You've got this guy who built his whole act in a small, crowded pub, delivering this raw, often hilarious anti-folk.
Yeah.
Suddenly playing to thousands upon thousands of people in a huge arena. It was proof, I suppose, that his very intimate, very direct style could actually translate successfully onto the biggest stages.
And did he keep the album schedule going through all this?
Flawlessly. 2012, bang on time, bought Fishing for a Thank You. Lee Smith and Jamie Lockhart handled production on that one.
And his own headline shows were growing, too.
Definitely. They kept climbing in scale. That period culminated in him headlining his own sold-out show at the Scala in King's Cross, London.
Scala's a decent-sized venue.
It is. And they actually recorded that show and released it as the Live at Scala compilation album in 2013. A nice marker of his live success.
And was the annual release strategy starting to show, like, actual chart results within his niche?
It was. His fifth album, Giving Everything, which came out in 2013, actually cracked the top 10 of the iTunes singer-songwriter chart.
Okay, so it proves the point, doesn't it? Far from diluting his impact, that constant presence, that yearly delivery was keeping him right at the forefront of people's minds within that dedicated audience.
Absolutely. People knew to expect it. They anticipated it.
Yeah.
Then 2014. That felt like another massive turning point, really scaling up the ambition and going international properly.
What happened in 2014?
Well, first off, he opened Frank Turner's entire UK stadium tour.
Stadium tour, not arena, stadium.
Stadiums. We're talking performing to an audience that sources estimate exceeded 100,000 people in just 1 week.
That is just staggering exposure for what is, at heart, a folk artist.
It's huge. And almost simultaneously, he made his first proper foray into the U.S. market. He embarked on his first American tour.
Doing his own shows?
Yeah, playing his own headline dates, but also doing support slots for the legendary Irish-American punk band Flogging Molly.
Flogging Molly. Okay, that's interesting. Supporting stadium folk with Frank Turner in the UK, and then supporting fiery Celtic punk with Flogging Molly in the US.
It really demonstrates the versatility baked into his anti-folk approach, doesn't it? He can slot in perfectly with the political rage and energy of punk, but also connect with the storytelling intimacy of folk. He moves between those worlds pretty seamlessly.
It's quite a balancing act.
It is. And quite fittingly, the sources note that this really successful, expansive year was also marked by a special release for Record Store Day in April 2014, a limited edition 10-inch vinyl called Best of Toast, pressed on a vinyl.
Acknowledging the growing back catalog.
Exactly. And of course, that release preceded the 6th studio album, right on schedule, December 1st, 2014. The grand scheme of things, the rhythm was unbroken.
Okay, so he's established the rhythm, he's scaled up massively, he's touring internationally. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. Section 3 covers what the sources frame as the creative evolution phase, roughly 2015 through to 2022.
Yeah, and this period really showcases an incredible creative fluidity. It's defined by, well, proper global reach, a noticeable thematic maturing in his writing, and some pretty daring experiments with how he actually made the records.
He really solidified that global road warrior status around 2015, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Touring relentlessly. UK, US, Netherlands, Germany, even South America, just constantly on the move. But what's interesting is, despite playing those huge stadium shows with Frank Turner, he didn't just abandon his roots.
No.
He specifically launched something called the Off the Road Tour around this time. And that focused entirely on playing smaller, more out-of-the-way UK venues. Pubs, small clubs, community centers.
So consciously staying connected to that intimate grassroots audience where it all began, even while doing massive tours.
Exactly. It's that balancing act again. He's got this huge platform, but he still prioritizes that close quarters connection. It seems vital to his whole thing.
And this period also saw some big shifts in how he actually produced the albums, right?
Yeah.
Almost treating each year's record as a kind of experiment.
Yeah, definitely experimenting with the environment and even setting creative constraints for himself. If you look at Rolling Up a Hill, the 2015 album, he recorded that one way over in Kansas, working with a band called Truck Stop Honeymoon.
Kansas. That's a change from London or Essex.
Right. Moving the whole recording process across the Atlantic, working with American musicians. You have to assume that injected a different flavor, maybe a bit more of a traditional, rootsy American folk sound, perhaps, contrasting with his very British lyrical focus.
Interesting. But then came the really radical departure, production-wise. That was 2016, a spanner in the works.
Yes. The Laptop album.
Exactly. The sources make a big deal of this. The entire album was recorded basically over one weekend using just a standard laptop.
That is just peak anti-folk commitment, isn't it? It's such an explicit rejection of needing high-cost studios, high-fidelity polish. It's all about the immediacy of the idea, the song, getting it down now.
And he doubled down on the constraint, didn't he, with the instrumentation?
He did. He made a specific choice. No guitar used anywhere on the album.
Yeah.
Except, apparently, for one specific track called 2016.
No guitar. For Beans on Toast. That's like his signature instrument.
Exactly. It forced him into completely new musical territory. Without that familiar crutch of the acoustic guitar, he had to rely on different textures, different rhythms, keyboards, beats, whatever was available on the laptop to carry the songs and tell the stories. It's a brilliant way to keep the yearly release feeling fresh and creatively challenging for himself.
It really suggests that the annual deadline doesn't lead to, like, creative laziness or just repeating formulas. It actually forces innovation.
I think that's a key takeaway. And around this time, he also started expanding his creative output beyond just music. He moved into writing books.
Which makes perfect sense for such a natural storyteller, really.
In 2018, he released his first book, Drunk Folk Stories. And it reads exactly how you'd imagine.
Like a stage banter.
Pretty much. It's a collection of 10 short, true-life stories, anecdotes about songwriting, life on the road, traveling, drinking, the stuff he talks about between songs at gigs.
A very natural extension of the brand or persona.
And he followed it up in 2021 with a second book, Foolhardy Folktales. This one showed a bit more structural playfulness, actually. It opened with a fictional story, set back in his hometown of Braintree in the 90s, before moving back into the more familiar, true tales from his travels.
And didn't the second book have something else unusual in it?
It did. Brilliantly. It included the full rules for a car game he apparently invented called Everyone's a Critic.
Huh. That's great. It just reinforces that whole idea that his entire creative output, the music, the books, these little side things, it's all just an extension of his life, his conversations. He's translating that casual, shared intimacy of the pub onto the page or into a game.
Totally. And while he was expanding into books, his songwriting themes were also maturing quite dramatically on the albums.
How so?
Well, his 10th studio album, A Bird in the Hand, from 2018, saw Ben Lovett return to the producer's chair.
Ah, the producer of the debut. Full circle.
Right. And that album marked a really significant thematic shift. The lyrics focused very heavily on the birth of his newborn daughter.
Okay, so moving from social commentary and road stories more toward...
Towards family, love, the world immediately on your doorstep. It grounded the songs in a different way. And again, when you're forced to produce an album every year, those huge life events, like becoming a parent, they hit the discography almost immediately. There's no lag.
That makes sense. Did the social commentary disappear altogether, though?
Not at all. In 2019, he announced the next album, The Inevitable Trainwreck, alongside more big US and UK tours. And the singles released ahead of that, like World Gone Crazy and England, I Love You, showed that the sharp observations about the state of things were definitely still there, just maybe balanced now with that domestic perspective.
Right. And then came the ultimate test, really, for his real-time journalistic approach to songwriting. The pandemic, 2020.
Yeah. This is probably the absolute ultimate proof of concept for the whole annual release model, isn't it? Instead of just putting out one album, dealing with a disruption like everyone else, McAllister responded by releasing 2 albums on his 40th birthday that December.
2 albums at once, during lockdown.
2 full albums. First, there was The Unforeseeable Future, and that was written and recorded entirely at home during lockdown, focusing directly on the COVID pandemic itself, the anxiety, the social upheaval, everything.
Wow, talk about immediate response.
And then simultaneously, he also released Knee Deep in Nostalgia. That one was produced by Frank Turner. Maybe offering a bit of comfort or reflection alongside the rawness of the pandemic album.
The timing of that. You just can't overstate the power of it. While loads of major artists were delaying their albums because they couldn't tour or maybe putting out pandemic-related songs months, even a year later.
He delivered this real-time, almost visceral commentary on the crisis as it was unfolding. That's what makes his approach so different. He captures the zeitgeist, the feeling of the moment, instantly. His albums become these historical artifacts of exactly what that year felt like.
So after the intensity of the pandemic albums, what came next? 2021.
Well, 2021 brought Survival of the Friendliest. That one was produced by Blaine Harrison from the Mystery Jets.
Ah, interesting choice.
Yeah. And musically and thematically, it felt like an optimistic counterpoint to the trauma of 2020. The focus shifted towards the beauty of the human spirit, finding joy, finding hope again.
A necessary shift, probably.
Probably, and that more optimistic tone clearly resonated. It led into a massive summer of touring where he played something like over 30 festivals. It showed that even after the lockdowns, his audience was still right there, fiercely loyal, and eager for his take on things.
And then 2022 saw another, perhaps surprising but maybe logical extension of his whole storytelling thing.
The Children's Project, yes.
Yeah.
He collaborated with Jamie and Lily Adamsfield on the fascinating adventures of Little B.
Was that just like a song or two?
No, it was a whole big project, a proper box set containing 10 children's stories and accompanying songs. The stories were beautifully illustrated by Lily Adamsfield, apparently, and focused on this character, Little B, learning important life lessons.
It makes sense, actually. If his whole thing is clear, accessible, honest storytelling, why wouldn't that translate to children's media, especially now being a parent himself?
Exactly. If you can talk honestly about politics or drinking or love or anxiety, you can definitely talk about kindness or sharing or whatever Little B was learning about. It maintains that core identity, the approachable, honest narrator, just for a different audience.
Which brings us then to section 4, the scale of output. We need to really take stock of this discography because when you look at the sheer volume, that catalog consistency isn't just impressive. It's basically his defining feature, his whole business strategy, isn't it?
It really is. It functions like, as we said, the annual almanac of anti-folk. Just hearing the list read out gives you a sense of the relentless discipline involved.
Okay, let's try and recap the main studio albums year by year from the start again.
Right. So Standing on a Chair, 2009. Then Writing on the Wall, 2010.
Yeah.
Try and Tell the Truth, 2011. Fishing for a Thank You, 2012. Giving Everything, 2013. The Grand Scheme of Things, 2014.
Still going?
Rolling Up the Hill, 2015. The Laptop Album, A Spanner in the Works, 2016. Tushti, 2017. The Family Focused One, A Bird in the Hand, 2018. The Inevitable Trainwreck, 2019.
Then the 2020 double whammy.
Yep, Knee Deep in Nostalgia A&E, The Unforeseeable Future. Followed by The Optimistic Turn, Survival the Friendliest, 2021. And then The Toothpaste and the Tube in 2023. Acknowledging Little B in 2022 was a major, slightly different output.
That is an incredible run. 15 years, 15 or 16, depending how you count 2020, major releases. And the sources suggest the machine isn't slowing down either.
Not at all. They even project future titles, anticipating Wild Goose Chasers likely for December 2024 and maybe Kill Them with Kindness in 2025. This tradition, it's clearly moved way beyond being just a novelty or a gimmick. It's become the sustainable, perpetual creative engine that he's built and, well, locked himself into.
Let's dig into the mechanics of that consistency from a sort of business angle. You mentioned the typical major label album cycle takes, what, 2-3 years sometimes?
Easily. Sometimes longer. You've got lengthy recording, mixing, mastering processes. Then you need to secure radio promotion slots months in advance, plan a huge marketing campaign, then launch a massive world tour to support it all. It's a huge, expensive, slow-moving machine.
Whereas Beans on Toast, he kind of bypasses a lot of that.
Pretty much. His annual release schedule creates its own built-in anticipation. The audience knows the December 1st delivery is coming, so a huge chunk of the marketing work is done just by sticking to the calendar. That predictability is gold.
And presumably lower production costs, too, especially if you're recording albums on a laptop or, relatively quickly compared to those multi-year major label projects.
Absolutely. A much quicker path from idea to market. He minimizes the massive financial risk associated with a huge 2-year album gamble by providing these smaller but constant injections of new material for his audience.
Keeps the connection fresh.
Exactly. And while those main studio albums are the core engine driving everything, the sources also remind us there's this constant stream of other projects that keep him visible in between.
Right, the non-studio stuff, like compilations.
Yeah, things like the early Rock Against Malaria benefit compilation he was on back in 2009. The Live at Scala album from 2013 captured that live energy. And that Best of Toast, pressed on vinyl for Record Store Day in 2014, served as a kind of marker, a mini retrospective even then.
And collaborations, too, like that Christmas single.
Oh, yeah, that was a nice touch. This Christmas, released in December 2015, was a one-off collaboration with the band Skinny Lister. Just shows he's constantly active, engaging with other artists in the scene, even while juggling the pressure of that self-imposed yearly deadline for his own album.
So the overall analysis really has to come back to that kind of journalistic function of this whole method, doesn't it?
I think so. While other artists might spend years honing a particular sound or theme in isolation, McAllister is out there delivering almost immediate social commentary. If there's a major political upheaval, a big social movement, a global event, you can pretty much guarantee that the album he releases that December will engage with it directly.
The pandemic albums are the starkest example, obviously. Revisiting the unforeseeable future from 2020. It wasn't a look back at COVID months later. It was a snapshot from inside the lockdown, capturing that specific anxiety and uncertainty in real time.
And that immediacy maintains the feeling that began way back in Nambucca, doesn't it? That feeling of intimacy, of conversation. He's speaking directly to his audience about the things they are all experiencing right here, right now.
It creates a very different kind of bond with the listener, I imagine. Each album isn't just music. It's like an accurate timestamp of his life and the wider world at that specific moment.
Exactly. The output feels constantly relevant, constantly alive, which is a sharp contrast to those long, heavily curated mainstream album cycles that can sometimes feel a bit detached from current events by the time they actually land. For Beans on Toast, December 1st isn't just his birthday.
It's the deadline, the necessary, inevitable deadline for that year's creative synthesis. So, let's try and pull this all together. What does this unique career trajectory mean for you, the listener? And maybe for anyone interested in, alternative ways of building a creative career, we've traced this fascinating arc of Jay McAllister.
Yeah, starting with forming Jellicoe back in Braintree, the key move to North London, and then establishing that essential, authentic Beans on Toast persona while literally living and working at Nambucca.
His whole path feels like a blueprint for artistic independence, doesn't it? He achieved global reach, but fueled it with this unwavering commitment to a grassroots ethos.
Absolutely. Master the local scene first, then scale up, but use your network. Use those key friendships like with Frank Turner. Solidify your place as a reliable fixture that Glastonbury guarantee is huge. And do it all while refusing to compromise on your core creative demand, which in his case is that prolific annual output.
And his core identity. It's built on that really unique blend. It's folk, definitely, but with that punk spirit, that anti-folk edge, and crucially, the comedy rock element that makes it so approachable.
His prominence, particularly in the UK folk and festival scenes, it's fundamentally built on that sheer discipline. The audacity, really, of sticking to that annual commitment for so long. He's basically proven that volume, when it's driven by relevance and genuine honesty, can actually be your most effective marketing tool.
He's a real testament to sustained, timely creative discipline. And he kept evolving, didn't he? Constantly diversifying how he made the record's high-profile studios one year, a laptop the next, expanding into books, even children's media.
He uses that self-imposed deadline almost like a creative weapon, forcing himself to constantly evolve, react, try something new rather than getting stuck in a rut.
So ultimately, the question his career poses, maybe to every creative person listening, is about endurance, about commitment. What does consistently releasing new, quality and thematically relevant content year after year after year actually teach us about sustained creative discipline, especially when compared to the standard industry model of taking multiple years between projects?
It raises that fundamental question for you to think about, doesn't it? Does the sheer urgency of an annual deadline actually elevate the creative process? Does it force a more immediate, maybe a rawer, more honest response? Or does that constant pressure risk compromising the deeper, more reflective curation that maybe those longer cycles allow for?
It's a fascinating tension.
It really is. And we'd encourage you, if you're curious, to really explore the thematic extremes within his discography. Go listen to some of the early albums full of those travel tales and pub stories, and then compare them to the deeply personal family focus of A Bird in the Hand.
Or contrast the almost journalistic speed of The Unforeseeable Future, capturing the pandemic moment, with something else entirely.
Exactly. Do that, and you'll really start to grasp the incredible depth and range he's achieved, all within this remarkably high-velocity creative framework. It leaves you with a final thought, perhaps. What could you achieve if you treated your own creative output less like a precious occasional event and more like, well, like a mandatory annual almanac?